The first thing I felt was the blade. Cold, thin, pressed right up under my jaw with exactly enough weight behind it to open the skin. There was a warm little line of my own blood sliding down my neck, taking its time, deciding whether to keep going. And there was a woman kneeling over me in a torn white veil, close enough that I could count her eyelashes, holding the sword that had put it there. She was, hands down, the most beautiful thing I had seen in 19 years of being alive, which was a genuine shame, because her eyes were doing the quiet math on how much pressure it would take to remove my head from the rest of me, and the answer was clearly, not much. "Are you a disciple of the Heavenly Sound Sect?" she asked. She already knew the answer. She just wanted to hear my voice do the shaking for her. A smarter man might have led with something dignified. "Senior, I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding." But the sword was against my throat, and my body had already voted unanimously for a hoarse little yes. And the maddening part, the part I want on the record, is that I was the good guy here. The night before, this same woman had come through my door, not opened it, through it, and collapsed on my floor. Flushed, drenched in sweat, her energy churning inside her like a river trying to climb out of its own banks. Poisoned, or a cultivation gone wrong, or the special combo platter of both. In that state, one bad tremor tears you open from the inside. So here is my single shining moment of virtue in this entire story. I could have stepped over her and gone to bed. Nobody would ever have known. Instead, like an idiot who keeps forgetting to throw his conscience away, I spent the whole night holding the storm inside her together, breath by breath, until the shaking finally stopped and she slept. And this was my reward. Because a woman like that does not want to be seen at her weakest, and I had seen all of it. "Eat this," she said. A pill appeared between her fingers. Small, dark, plain. Absolutely radiating, "You will not enjoy this." "Senior, what is?" Her leg came up into my stomach, my mouth opened on pure reflex, and the pill went in. Very efficient. 10 out of 10, no notes. Then she scooped up her fallen clothes, a soft pink mist folded around her like she'd never existed, and she was out the window before I finished coughing. I lay there a while, touched my neck. The cut had already scabbed over, and I did the only sensible thing a man in a demonic sect can do after nearly dying before breakfast. I started working out how to make sure it never happened again. Because in the cultivation world, "what's done is not a saying. It's the joke people tell right before they get killed for knowing too much, especially in a demonic sect, where a moment of carelessness gets you gutted by the person standing next to you, purely because they woke up in the mood for it. Introductions, since I've got a second and the demoness has left the building. My name is Li Wei, 19 years old, and every one of those years has been a slog uphill in the rain. Born poor, kicked out by a stepmother who then found the entrepreneurial spirit to sell me to a demonic sect during a famine, 2 steamed corn buns, and out the door. That was the whole going away package. If I hadn't started cultivating, if the sect hadn't been desperate enough to buy warm bodies that year, I'd be a ghost by now, a cheap one. But somewhere along the way, my body picked up a passenger, a gift, a cheat, call it what you want. When I focus, I can see things drifting over the world that nobody else can. Little bubbles of light rising off spirit herbs, off dead beasts, off anything with a scrap of power still in it. White ones mostly. Green if I'm lucky. Blue if the heavens are feeling generous. And when a bubble drifts into me, the world quietly rounds up. A hair more strength, a hair more toughness, a hair more spirit. The catch, there is always a catch, is that it is slow, insultingly slow. Strength and toughness soak right in, but the cultivation itself collects in a pool that fills 1 drop at a time, and it does nothing at all until the pool hits 100. Then, all at once, it converts, and I climb a single step. It took me years to fill that pool twice. Years for 1 step. And I have to hide even that, because a teenager who levels up too fast in a place like this does not get a pat on the head, he gets noticed. And in a demonic sect, noticed is listed in the records as a cause of death. There's more the world bolted onto me, half finished and waiting. An ability called daily appraisal. I couldn't switch it on yet, but the promise was simple and enormous. Look at a thing once a day and just know what it truly is, and one that came free, that I didn't understand at all back then. 9 turns, substitute death. A spare life, folded up and tucked behind my ribs, for the day the world finally sends the bill. 9 of them, the name implies. I have never once been a lucky man, so I assumed I'd need every single one. I got up, changed the blood-stained sheets, because evidence is evidence. Looked out over my little corner of the world, the river below the cliff, the herbs catching the first light, and said the truest thing I know, out loud, to nobody in particular. The world's a lot nicer when it's at peace. Then I went to work. Because the demoness with the sword was a problem for whatever version of me survived the morning, and I had every intention of being him. Work, for me, was the spirit herb garden. Picture a wide field of medicine tucked into a valley, 2 nervous guards at the gate, and dead center a single 9-petaled flower the color of a fresh wound. Heartbreak grass. Most days it just sits there smelling faintly of nothing, but when its petals fall, the scent it throws out drops grown cultivators into dreams and leaves them wandering around lovesick for a week. The sect grinds it into 3 different pills, one of which can drag a man into an endless illusion where he either comes out 10 times stronger or doesn't come out at all. Lovely little plant. Great neighbors. For me, though, the garden was a farm, and the crop was bubbles. Every morning they'd drift up out of the soil and sink into me while I pretended to inspect the rows. Strength. Spirit. The occasional cheap spirit sword I'd never use filed away in the general direction of sell it later. This was the whole reason I'd clawed my way from outer disciple to inner disciple. Not glory, not status. Access. More places to stand meant more bubbles to breathe. Romance of the immortal path. Everybody. That morning there was a woman waiting for me in the pavilion. Lin Mei. A senior sister from a place called the Heavenly Joy Pavilion, which trains its disciples in the fine art of being so attractive your brain files for early retirement. Normally, standing near her, I'd have to consciously remember my own name. Powerful, practiced, wall-to-wall charm. And I felt absolutely nothing. I want to be clear about how strange this was. She smiled at me the way she'd smile at a man she intended to own, and my heart went on doing its ordinary, boring job. No flutter. No fog. Just a mild clinical note filed somewhere in the back of my skull. Huh. Whatever that pill had done to me, it hadn't been a poison in the way I'd expected. It had turned some dial in my head all the way down to 0. I hear junior brother is about to reach foundation establishment, she said, leaning in, all sweetness. At 20. That's impressive. A sliver of a chance, I said, and kept my eyes on the herbs. She circled the real question 3 times before she landed on it, soft as a feather. Junior brother, if you were given the chance to join a proper immortal sect, a righteous one, would you take it? And there it was. In a demonic sect, that sentence isn't a kindness. It's a trapdoor with a smile painted on it. Say yes, and either you've just confessed treason to a spy, or you've been marked by one. She watched my face while I very carefully arranged it into nothing, then laughed like she was joking, warned me sweetly not to get scammed by immortal sects, and drifted off. I stood there a long moment. A dangerous woman had just asked me a dangerous question, and the only reason I hadn't tripped into it was a pill a different dangerous woman had kicked down my throat that morning. My life had a real theme going, but danger later. Tonight was mine. I went home, checked every shadow twice, and sat down to break through. The pool was full. Blood and cultivation, both at 100, waiting. I opened the gates and let it all pour in at once, and my whole body became a furnace, bones grinding, blood roaring, everything I was getting torn down and welded back together sturdier. It went on until dawn, and when the last of it settled and the smoke cleared behind my eyes, I was standing on new ground. Foundation establishment, at 20. Quietly, in a wooden cabin, with the door I'd fixed after a demoness broke it. I didn't tell a soul. What I did instead was finally reach for that second gift the world had been holding. Daily appraisal had come alive during the breakthrough, and I couldn't wait. I walked outside and pointed it, my brand new, mysterious, once-a-day power to see the truth of any object in existence, at the first thing I saw. My own cabin. The answer arrived instantly, crisp and complete. Built 3 years ago from sturdy green wood, personally constructed by Li Wei, appears solid. The internal structure has numerous hidden flaws and may collapse at any time. I looked at my house. My house looked back, keeping its many secrets. Right, I said, so it was less a window into fate and more a brutally honest home inspector. Fine. I could work with brutally honest, because if it would tell me the truth about a cabin, it would tell me the truth about a person, and in a sect where everyone smiling at me wanted something. Being the one man in the room who could read the label was going to be worth more than any sword. I just had to survive long enough to test it on someone who mattered. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long. She came knocking within the month. By then, the sect had started hunting traitors. Lists were being drawn up, names were quietly vanishing, and the whole mountain had that specific stillness of a place waiting for the axe to fall. So when Lin Mei turned up at my cabin instead of the garden, my remote out-of-the-way cabin that nobody visits on purpose, every hair I owned stood up and filed a complaint. She came inside, dropped the sweetness, and told me the truth, or a truth. She was a true disciple of the Luoxia Immortal Sect, undercover, her mission complete, her cover blown. She needed one small favor. Hold this for me. She set a jade pendant on my table, carved with symbols doing their level best to look ordinary and failing. Hide it, deliver it to her sect when she was dead, and a place in a righteous immortal sect would be waiting for me. Her reward, her legacy, all of it mine. She looked at me with eyes brimming, ready to die for the cause, and reached out to press the pendant into my hand. And something in me said, check the label. Daily appraisal. First time on a living person. I'd assumed people couldn't be read. People could be read. Early Foundation establishment. Inner disciple of the Luoxia sect, infiltrated to steal the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, identity about to be exposed. She urgently needs a scapegoat. Seeing that you don't behave like a demonic disciple, she has chosen you. She is currently pouring charm magic into you to make you take the pendant willingly. If that fails, she will kill you to keep you quiet. I read it twice, calm as still water, while my face did nothing. So those were the choices, spelled out in plain text. Take the pendant, and I die in her place the moment the enforcers arrive. A wanted traitor holding the smoking gun. Refuse, and she opens my throat before I finish the word, no. She'd been at this level for years and had a whole war chest of tricks. Straight up, in a fair fight, I lost, so I didn't give her one. Master? I said, staring wide-eyed over her shoulder. It's an old trick. It's a stupid trick. It works because the human animal cannot not look. Lin Mei spun, sword already leaping into her hand, a shield and accuse half formed on her lips. My martial nephew Li Wei is a traitor, and for one heartbeat there was nothing behind her at all, because of course there wasn't. By the time she understood that, my dagger was already in her neck. I'd love to tell you I agonized. I didn't have the luxury. She was faster than me, even dying, blasted me off my feet with a wave of force, hit the ground, clutched her throat, and started bargaining. The pavilion master wants me. My senior brothers will skin you alive. Junior brother, you can't. I heard all of it. I answered none of it. I picked up my sword and finished what the dagger had started, and then, because I am not a man who takes chances with people who keep tricks up their sleeves, I made very sure. Then I stood in my own quiet cabin and felt genuinely, uselessly sad. I wasn't built for this. I didn't want to be. But the cultivation world does not hand out time to get used to things. It hands you a choice, you or them, and then leans in to see if you flinch. I didn't flinch. I want that on the record too, right next to the part where I was the good guy. Then I went and found my master. His name was Si Yin Feng, Lord of Emotion-Severing Cliff, and he had the warm, approachable personality of a locked door in winter. He looked down at the body. He asked when I'd reached Foundation establishment. Last month, I said. He asked if that was why I'd chosen a sneak attack. Yes, I said. He nodded once, told me the enforcement hall would be in touch and I'd better cooperate, and carried her away without another word. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a year, one dangerous, beautiful woman down. I did not yet understand that in this sect, killing one only moved you up the list to meet the next. 7 quiet days passed before I got curious about the pill. I'd been dodging that question, honestly, but the not feeling anything around Lin Mei had kept nagging at me, so one morning I turned daily appraisal on the one thing I'd been too nervous to check, myself. The answer rearranged my entire life in a single sentence: heaven-severing goo poison. It forces the host into a permanent state of cold clarity, immune to all charm and manipulation of the heart, except in the presence of a woman carrying the matching yin goo poison. I sat with that for a while. So the demoness hadn't only silenced me, she'd armored me. Every charm technique in a sect built on charm techniques, every sweet-voiced spy leaning in to fog my brain, all of it now slid straight off me like rain off a roof. That was why Lin Mei's magic hadn't worked. That was why I'd read her like a shopping list while she poured her whole art into my eyes. The single most dangerous weakness a young man can have in this place, a pretty face, had been surgically removed from me with one kick to the stomach. And here was the joke, the real one, the one the universe saved for last. There was exactly one crack in the armor, one woman on the entire continent my heart would still stumble for, the woman with the matching poison, the one who'd put a sword to my throat and vanished out my window. Fantastic. Bulletproof against the whole world, with a single hole in the vest shaped precisely like the most terrifying person I'd ever met. I decided firmly that the smartest thing I could do with that information was never ever see her again. The universe heard me. The universe filed it under requests, because I'd barely stepped out my door the next day when 3 men blocked the path. Young, hard-eyed, wearing that faint reek of the enforcement corps, and out of pure survival instinct I appraised the one in front. Vast Heaven's Sect true disciple, born with the Dragon's Fury, late Golden Core cultivation, undercover in the Heavenly Sound Sect out of boredom. I nearly swallowed my tongue. The Vast Heaven Sect is the single strongest immortal sect under heaven, and one of its golden children was standing in a demonic sect's enforcement uniform because he was bored. Bored. I bowed very low to the 3 senior brothers and prepared for absolutely anything. His name was Wang Cheng, and he had questions about the traitor I'd killed. I gave him the story I'd given my master. He listened. Then he handed down the verdict, gentle as a man reading a weather report. For the crime of slaughtering a Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciple, I was fined 1,000 spirit stones, payable within 3 months. My cultivation resources were docked for 5 years. And since Lin Mei's last contact had been me, I was confined to the sect, leave without permission, and it would be treason. I stood there and did the math. As an inner disciple, I earned 10 spirit stones a month. 10. The fine was 1,000. It would take me 8 years of not eating to pay a penalty for killing a spy who tried to frame me for treason. Any questions? One of them asked. No, I said, because that's the thing nobody tells you about being the good guy in a demonic sect. You do everyone a favor by removing a traitor, and the sect thanks you by billing you for it on an installment plan at knife point. The whole thing was clearly a piece of theater to keep the Heavenly Joy Pavilion happy, and I was the prop. I watched the 3 of them walk off, and I let out a long breath, and I updated my to-do list. Grow stronger, hide it, and find 1,000 spirit stones before a pavilion full of angry, beautiful people decided I'd taken too long. 1,000 spirit stones when you make 10 a month is not a debt, it's a life sentence with extra steps. I had 168 to my name and a talent for making enemies. So I went looking for work, and on the way I ran into Chen Kai, an old outer sect roommate, decent guy, now an inner disciple himself. He was pleased to see me, introduced me around to a couple of friends, the 4 of us doing the polite little dance of promising young cultivators. Genius at 20, they said. Impressive, they said. Then one of them asked casually if I happened to know who'd killed Lin Mei of the Heavenly Joy Pavilion. That would be me, I said. You have never seen 4 faces reprice a man so fast. They found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. Later I overheard them settling it among themselves. He only got strong through some lucky encounter, no real backing, offended the pavilion, stay away, or you'll drag your master into it, and that was that. In the space of one honest answer, I went from prodigy to plague. I didn't blame them exactly, that's just physics here. Getting close to a man the pavilion wants dead is a great way to end up dead adjacent, but I filed the feeling away with the others, because standing around feeling snubbed doesn't pay a fine. The high coin work all needed skills I didn't have, alchemy, forging, things that cost a fortune just to start learning, except one, talisman making, cheapest door in the building, and the manual was right there for sale. So I bought it and a stack of paper, and I taught myself to paint little slips of power in the dark of my cabin every night. Swiftness talismans, fire talismans, the humble stuff. 3 spirit stones a night if I was lucky, which against 1,000 stone fine felt like bailing out a lake with a teacup. But the lake doesn't care how you feel about it. You bail. And I took the one decent mission on the board. 7 days tending a spirit herb up at White Moon Lake. 20 stones. Above my usual pay grade, but I'd worked a garden for years, so I qualified. White Moon Lake sits at the top of the sect, where the spiritual energy runs so rich you can practically drink it, where the genuine geniuses cultivate and rarely bother to learn your name. My little emotion-severing cliff was a gutter by comparison. I felt it the moment I stepped up there. The air itself was better fed than I was. The senior sister who met me at the gate was named Su Ling, and she was the first person in a long while who looked at me like a person instead of a problem or a purse. Clear eyes, no games, kind in the plain way that has nothing to prove. She wasn't the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I'd met that one already, sword and all, but she was the most restful, and in a demonic sect that's rarer and worth more. She warned me gently that the flower I'd be tending was about to bloom and that I'd be punished if I botched it, and she said it the way you warn a friend, not a servant. I made a private note to be very good to Su Ling on the increasingly reliable theory that anyone who was actually nice to me for no reason was either the rarest thing in the sect or the most dangerous. With her, it turned out to be the first one. It almost never was. The flower's keeper was a steward named Elder Malin, a middle-aged beauty in pale blue who looked at me like I'd personally borrowed money from her and skipped town. My job was simple and strange. Every half-hour afternoon, 6 times a day, pour lava from a crimson gourd onto the edge of a field of white frost, around a white flower called the pure yang. Water a flower with magma, sure. I'd stopped asking this world to make sense. It only got insulted when I did, so I settled into a rhythm that would have killed a normal man out of sheer boredom. Talismans at night. My own garden in the morning, sell in the market at noon, lava duty in the afternoon, round and round. And here's the part that mattered, the part nobody watching me sweat over a gourd could see. Every single day at White Moon Lake, a blue bubble drifted up off that pure yang flower and into me. Blue. Cultivation and blood, the good stuff, the stuff I usually clawed out of the ground 1 crumb at a time, handed to me daily, for the crime of pouring hot rocks on schedule. I was being paid 20 stones to get quietly, invisibly stronger in the richest garden in the sect. If they'd known what I was actually harvesting up there, they'd have charged me 1,000 more. On the last day, the flower jumped the gun. I came up for my shift, and there was no blue bubble waiting. There was a purple one. Purple sits 2 whole tiers above blue on the little scale I'd worked out over the years. Purple means a fragment of a divine ability, the rarest harvest I knew how to name. The pure yang had matured a day early, and it had left me a going-away present. That third fragment clicked into place inside me, and a power I'd been assembling piece by piece for months finally sat there, whole, ready to claim. I reported the early bloom to Elder Milan, who vanished on the spot to go pick her precious flower before it wilted, and she was so relieved she almost smiled at me. Almost. Then she said the 4 words that turn a good day sideways in this sect. Come meet the owner. The owner turned out to be a stunning woman in white, sitting in a lakeside pavilion with the calm authority of someone who has never once had to raise her voice. Elder Ye Xuan, one of the 4 guardian elders, and, I'd learn on the walk out, the acting head of the entire sect, second only to a leader nobody ever saw. Absolute power of life and death, wearing a pleasant smile. She praised my work, then she threatened me, do this next task poorly, and you know what you'll face, in the exact same pleasant tone, because in a demonic sect, the praise and the threat are the same sentence with a comma in it. And she handed me a seed, half black, half white, roughly the size of a quail egg. Plant it, she said. Take good care of it. That was all. No instructions, no explanation, no what it was, no what happens if. 40 spirit stones for my trouble, double the mission fee. I walked out with a seed in my hand and a very loud alarm going off in my skull. The acting leader of a demonic sect does not personally hand a random inner disciple a plant and wander off. There should have been 100 people more qualified than me. There was a reason, and the reason was not going to be good news for the man holding the seed. But that was tomorrow's problem, because daily appraisal only fires once a day, and I'd already spent it. So first, I took what the pure yang had given me. I sat down, told the power to come, and claimed the ability those 3 fragments had built. It felt like someone poured a bucket of ice water straight through the top of my skull, cold, clean, absolute. Every stray thought, every bit of mental fog and clutter, rinsed clean in a single breath, and then a stillness like standing on a mountain peak at dawn. Clear mind. When I opened my eyes, the world had sharpened by a factor of 10. I picked up my talisman manual to test it, and the technique I'd been fumbling at for weeks simply unfolded in my head, obvious as counting. I painted 5 talismans that night without breaking a sweat. The clarity was going to pay my fine, and it hadn't even been the point. The point arrived the next morning when I finally spent appraisal on the seed. Born at the dawn of creation, a flower took shape between heaven and earth. Over uncounted ages, the 2 grew distinct. The heavenly fragrance Tao flower bore fruit, and its seeds fell. This is one of them. Bury it. Water it a single bowl a day, and in 7 days, it will root and sprout. I read the name 3 times, and a cold sweat I hadn't earned yet broke out across my back. The heavenly fragrance Tao flower. I knew that name. I'd read it exactly once before, in an appraisal. It was the reason Lin Mei had come to this sect. It was the thing she'd infiltrated for, the thing she'd been ready to frame me and die for, which meant every other spy hiding in these mountains had almost certainly come for the same prize, and the acting head of the sect had just buried it in my backyard. Everyone who mattered was going to be watching me now. Every smiling face was going to have a second reason to lean in close. I'd spent my whole life trying to be too small to see, and someone with the power to end me had just painted a target on my house and handed me the brush. The demonic sect, I said to the empty courtyard, is no place for a human being. Then I found a good spot, planted the most wanted object in the sect, walked a ring of stones around it so nobody could see it grow, and poured it exactly 1 bowl of water. Because when the world hands you a live coal, you can drop it and burn, or you can learn to hold it. I'd already decided I was going to hold it long enough to become the kind of man nobody could take it from. A fierce-eyed senior sister named Feng Hua found me in the market that afternoon and ordered 50 fire talismans in 3 days. I told her I couldn't possibly. She tossed me a deposit and told me to try. It was, I realized, the closest thing to good news I'd had all week. Somebody wanted something from me that I could actually sell. 7 days later, the coal I'd been holding decided to show me why everyone wanted it. I was painting a talisman when an invisible wave of spirit energy swept across my brush and lit it up like dry grass. It came from the courtyard. I ran to the balcony and saw the whole yard rippling like the surface of a struck pond, a pressure rolling out from that one tiny sprout that, thank every god listening, stopped dead at my fence. If it had reached past the wall, I'd have had a very hard morning explaining a crater to the neighbors. Then the ripples faded. 2 little leaves nosed up out of the soil, and something floated up beside them that I had never seen in my life. A bubble the color of purple and gold together. I'd cataloged white, green, blue, purple. This was a rung above the top of my ladder, a color that had no business existing. I leapt down at dawn and let it sink into me, and the world wrote me a single line I still think about. Legend of Purple and Gold. No item name, just a title and a door. I opened it, and a whole scripture pressed itself into my mind at once, ancient and vast, and 4 words at its heart burned brighter than the rest. The Hongmeng Heart Sutra. A primordial art from the dawn of things, where a wisp of purple chi wrapped the heavens and gave birth to all creation. I sat with it for an hour before I understood what I was holding. A top-tier cultivation technique. That alone would have made my year. But the Hongmeng Heart Sutra doesn't just make you strong. As it cultivates, it births a primordial purple chi that wraps around every scrap of power in your body and hides it. The one thing I needed more than air, a way to grow fast without lighting up like a beacon. And the flower had just handed it to me stapled to the best technique I'd ever touch. I'd spent years terrified that speed would get me killed. In one night, I switched my entire cultivation over to the Hongmeng Sutra, and the fear quietly packed its bags. Now I could climb as fast as I wanted, and to any eye that looked, I'd still just be plain, forgettable Li Wei, the harmless boy with the herbs. The strength went up, the reading went to 0. It was the single most beautiful trait of my life, and the universe had made it with a flower it wanted me to babysit. After that, the mornings got generous. 2 blue bubbles a day, every day, drifting up off the heavenly fragrance flower, like it was tipping me for the water. My cultivation, which used to fill 1 grudging drop at a time, started actually moving. Between the flower and clear mind, and a talisman brush that no longer fought me, I stopped being a poor man scraping by and started being a poor man with a plan. I ground out talismans until the failures turned into successes, and the successes turned into a pile of spirit stones. I paid down the fine 1 grimy handful at a time, and when the pool filled again, I opened the gates under a shroud of purple chi and stepped up to the middle stage of foundation establishment, quietly, in my cabin, while the whole sect went right on thinking I was a lucky nobody 1 bad day from a beating. I should have known better than to enjoy it. Peace for me has always been the sound a trap makes right before it closes. Because I stepped into my courtyard the next morning, still warm from the breakthrough, and there was a woman standing beside my flower in a red dress with the sunlight on her, and my quiet, careful, perfectly hidden little life took 1 look at her and fell straight off a cliff. It was her. And here's how I knew. Before I even placed the face, my heart moved. After weeks of gliding through the sect like a stone through water, feeling exactly nothing for the most gorgeous spies the demonic path could throw at me, 1 look at this woman and the whole machine came back online. Pulse, breath, that stupid warm lurch behind the ribs, my 1 crack in the armor, standing in my yard, admiring my flower, the goo poison's little joke, delivered in person. I bowed so fast I nearly pulled something. This junior greets senior. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Middle stage of foundation establishment, she said, glancing at me sideways. Your promotion went very smoothly. My blood went cold. I was wrapped head to toe in primordial purple chi, the finest concealment art the world had ever coughed up. Nobody was supposed to be able to see through it. Nobody. She read the panic on my face and found it dull. Cultivation can be hidden, she said. The body is honest, the speed your power circulates, the depth of your breathing, how far your spirit reaches. You've been sitting at this stage for a while now. A pause. And you climbed it right under my nose. Am I blind? I had no answer. I filed away a very expensive lesson. Concealment fools the eye, not the master. And I kept my head down while I quietly, gently, spent appraisal on the woman in front of me. First time I'd ever tried to read her. I needed to know what I was standing next to. The answer came back. Just question marks. A wall. Whatever she was, she sat so far above me that my 1 true window onto the world simply fogged over and refused to look. I have never in my life felt smaller than I did reading those 3 symbols, and I've been sold for 2 corn buns. She crouched and touched the little sprout and said almost fondly, "This flower is mine now. Tend it until it blooms and bears fruit. Any objections?" Senior, this. The word wasn't even out before a fraction of her aura rolled off her like a tide and slammed me into my own wall, not to hurt, just to correct. I peeled myself off the plaster, entirely unharmed, and understood 2 things at once, that she could have unmade me between heartbeats, and that she'd chosen a love tap instead, in a demonic sect that passes for warmth. No objections, I said from the floor. Somewhere in the back of my rattled skull, a piece clicked into place. The acting head of the sect buries the single most coveted flower under heaven in a nobody's yard, tells him to grow it, and then the most terrifying woman I'd ever met keeps showing up to look at it. That's not a coincidence. That's a fishing line. The flower was bait, and the biggest, most dangerous fish in the pond was standing right in front of me, deciding she liked the look of my worm. I decided very firmly to pretend I hadn't thought of that. She didn't kill me, she did something stranger. She left a formation diagram on my table. Set this up around the flower, she said. It keeps the spirit energy from leaking out and doubles as fuel for your own cultivation. Follow the lines, no skill required. And then, like an afterthought, she tossed me a book with no title on the cover, handwritten, elegant. And when I opened it that night, my breath actually caught. It was a treatise on hiding, on breath control, on reining in your spirit, on masking every honest tell the body makes, and reading between the lines, on doing the exact reverse, reading those tells and everyone else, deducing a stranger's true realm from the way they breathed. The single most useful book I would ever own, casually handed to a boy she could crush with a look. Take good care of my flower, she said, and her gaze at the door dropped the temperature of the whole room by 10 degrees. If anything happens to it, you'll answer for my anger. Then she was a streak of red and gone. I stood there a long time, cold sweat drying on my back. She'd threatened me, blasted me into a wall, and claimed the most valuable thing I owned. She'd also just handed me a legendary technique for free, the way you'd hand a child a snack. This woman was going to be the most dangerous relationship of my life, and I already knew, with the grim certainty of a man reading his own appraisal, that I would spend the next several years growing flowers for her and being grateful she let me. She really, really wanted that flower. Which meant the flower was going to keep me alive, right up until the day it got me killed. I spent the next half-month living inside her nameless book, and by the end of it, I could stand in a crowd of masters and read as nothing but a plain, early foundation nobody. Real strength, buried so deep, even I had to remind myself it was there. The peace this bought me lasted exactly until someone from the Heavenly Joy Pavilion got bored. That's the pavilion I'd apparently declared war on by killing Lin Mei, and I'd finally learned why they cared so much about one mid-ranked spy. Their pavilion master, at a critical wall in his cultivation, needed a woman of a specific natural charm physique to break through, a living key. Lin Mei had been exactly that key, which made me the boy who'd snapped it. Somewhere up the food chain, a very powerful man was extremely unhappy with me, and unhappy powerful men send small mean ones to test the water. The small mean one's name was Miao Qian, mid-stage foundation establishment, a nasty little smile, and a talent for public theater. He strolled up to my market stall, scooped every talisman I had off the table, 4 fire, 6 concentration, 42 stones worth, and then patted his robes with theatrical dismay. Terribly sorry, junior brother, I seem to have left my stones at home. Tell you what. Come collect them at the Heavenly Joy Pavilion. The whole street heard it. That was the point. Walking into the Heavenly Joy Pavilion to dun a man for 40 stones was a creative way to commit suicide, and everyone watching knew it, and nobody moved, because this happens to men with no one behind them roughly once a week. I smiled and thanked him and said I'd wait for him tomorrow. Miao Qian did not understand something about me, which was that I no longer had a fair fight problem. That night, he took a mountain path home, a junior brother in tow, bragging about his easy money. I tapped the junior out cold. Then the shadows moved. A dagger found Miao Qian's neck. He clutched at it, gasped that there had to be some misunderstanding, and a long sword answered from behind him. Then another. Then several more, until he hung pinned to a tree like a notice board, still trying to work out how a mid-stage foundation cultivator was dying this easily to a nobody. Why? He managed. I'm here to collect the money, I said. He had 60 spirit stones on him. 60. I'd carried more than that as a chi-refining outer disciple. A mid-stage foundation cultivator, and he was broke, even after reselling my own talismans. I left the cheap spirit swords in him on purpose. I had a warehouse of the things and no way to spend them, and a body full of untraceable blades tells no tales. The next morning, Wang Cheng came to my cabin, poured himself my tea, and told me Miao Qian was dead. Killed with a neck strike and a swarm of spirit swords. Technique looked, he said, watching my face the whole time, an awful lot like mine. I let the silence sit. Then I asked mildly if I was being framed. Hard to say, he said, but without evidence, the pavilion can't touch you. He set his cup down. Of course, this proves something else. It proves a man on our watch list can be killed just as quietly as anyone. And then, because Wang Cheng never says one true thing when he can wrap it in a warning, he told me what happens to disciples who kill their own. The Lawless Tower. A place that eats your cultivation and spits you back out at least one whole realm weaker if it spits you back at all. Golden cores went in and came out feebler than me. So, I said, you'd have to be very sure you wouldn't get caught. Or very good at not leaving evidence, he agreed pleasantly, and added me to his personal watch list and thanked me for the tea. Then he mentioned, on his way out, the one line the sect leader was famous for, the thing she'd reportedly said the last time someone asked whether a genius who broke the sect's law might be spared. Even a genius. Is he as talented as me? To interfere with law enforcement is to shake the foundation. Kill him. The sect leader, I noted, once he was gone. Sounds like a delight. But I'd learned the shape of the cage now. Inside the sect, kill cleanly, and the enforcers merely raised an eyebrow. Outside, you were fair game to anyone. And a man on the watch list, ironically, was the safest man in the building because killing him meant answering to the enforcement hall, and nobody wanted that, which was the first time it occurred to me that being a suspect might be worth more than being cleared. I tucked the thought away. I was going to need it. The flower kept paying rent. Every so often, Elder Ye Xuan sent down a reward for the fine job I was doing raising it, and every reward rewrote my odds. First came a piece of soft armor. I appraised it the instant I was alone. One of the 9 heavens battle armor, capable of shrugging off most golden core attacks on its own, and part of a set, each new piece stacking the last. A foundation cultivator, quietly wearing armor rated to eat blows from 2 whole realms above him. Later came a pair of bracers from the same set, and these did something even better. Each one could swallow an attack and hold it, so I could pour a mountain suppression into them at my leisure and then unleash it later in a blink. No windup, no warning. Stored thunder on a wrist. I sat there fitting the pieces together and did some quiet arithmetic about exactly how generous a sect gets about a flower nobody will explain to you. If the reward for growing it was armor that ate the attacks of gods and gauntlets that spat lightning on command, I did not want to know what the flower itself was worth. I wanted, very badly, to collect the whole set before I found out. I paid the 1,000-stone fine on the last possible day through Wang Cheng, who registered it and destroyed the bill with a smile that told me he was collecting a favor, not a fee. On my way out, I read him again, because I'm nothing if not thorough, and stopped dead. Golden Core completion. He'd been late Golden Core weeks ago. He was climbing at a speed that would embarrass a shooting star, apparently as a hobby, on top of being undercover for fun. I was starting to think the vast heaven sect grew its true disciples in a very different soil than mine. Time did its thing. I turned 20. I ground talismans into a modest fortune, filled my pool, and stepped up again under my shroud of purple chi, still hiding, always hiding. And then the sect handed down the assignment list, and my name was on it, and my quiet season ended the way quiet seasons always do here, with a job I couldn't refuse. But before the job found me, the job's opposite did. He arrived at my garden one morning at my master's side, a boy about my age, neat, bright-eyed, wearing that specific glow of someone who has never once been told no. Zhao Yu, a true disciple of emotion-severing Cliff, a full rank above me on paper, and, per my appraisal, blessed by the spirits of mountains and rivers and carrying the inheritance of some ancient power. A genuine genius, the real article, the kind the sect actually invests in. He looked at me the way the promising look at the overlooked, politely, from above. "Senior Brother Li," he said, and I could hear the quotation marks around senior. "I hear you're 19. I intend to surpass you." He said it like a gift he was giving me. "How long do you think it'll take?" "A few years, probably," I said, which was true, in the sense that in a few years he'd have climbed to the middle stage while I stood politely at the early stage, and neither of us would say the number out loud. He wanted to spar. I said sure. Beating him would have been a headache. Losing to him would keep me small and forgettable, which was the entire brand. I could afford to lose to a genius. It was practically a public service. I had no way of knowing that within the year that cheerful, cocky boy would learn exactly how badly I could hurt his feelings. Or that before either of us grew up, the sect was going to feed the two of us, the shining true disciple and the invisible nobody, into the same demon-infested hole, to see which one came out. Spoiler, since you're wondering, only one of the 2 people it worried about came out of that place, and it wasn't the genius they'd bet on. The mission was called Clean Out the Demon's Den, and the fun part was the guest list. 5 of us, me, 2 disciples from the Heavenly Joy Pavilion, Shu Lan and Gao Lei, which meant 2 of Lin Mei's people, both of whom would happily watch me die in a hole where the enforcement hall famously does not investigate, and 2 from other peaks who couldn't stand the pavilion, Shui Zhong of Ice Moon Valley, and a senior sister named An Xiang. A team perfectly balanced to keep the pavilion from murdering me outright because their enemies would be right there watching. Somebody had built that team on purpose. Somebody who wanted me to survive without ever admitting they cared. I looked at the roster and thought, quietly, "Thank you, Master," and never said it out loud, because that's the closest either of us got to affection. Then, Tang Yue found me. Tang Yue was a senior sister from Yanyun Peak with a warm, sunny smile, and per my very first appraisal of her, the actual job title of undercover holy maiden candidate for the Heavenly Saint Sect, ruthless, a knife behind every grin. Naturally, she was lovely to me. She pressed a slip of paper into my hand, the full breakdown of all 4 teammates, strengths, techniques, tells, smiled, and floated off promising to call in the favor later. In a demonic sect, even the Assassin's Network. Gao Lei, the note said, was the dangerous one. He'd been quietly, insanely in love with Lin Mei, and I had put a dagger in her neck. So on top of the pavilion's cold grudge, one of my 4 teammates carried a personal boiling one. He confirmed it in person, strolling up to pat my shoulder and remark, with a smile full of teeth, that a man with a body as weak as mine could die so easily down there. Don't blame me for not saving you, junior brother. Noted. I went to prepare for the man who wanted me dead instead of just the ones who wanted my flower. My master, in the driest transaction of my life, jabbed 2 fingers at my forehead and poured a blade art into my skull, the demonic sound slash, then handed me a book and told me to figure out the rest. With clear mind, the rest took 7 days instead of the usual month. When I tested it on a stream, the water didn't part. It stopped, hung in the air in 1,000 pieces, and came down as rain over a canyon that hadn't been there a second earlier. Not bad for a week's homework. I filled my pool, stepped up to the late stage of foundation establishment behind my purple curtain, and went shopping for a knife. I bought the cheapest one that could kill quietly. A black-bodied shadow blade, near invisible in the dark, built for exactly the kind of work I was afraid I'd be doing. 700 stones, most of what I had. An assassin's knife for an errand that everyone had already decided would end with me dead in a cave nobody would investigate. On the morning we left, Wang Chung fell into step beside me with the specific gentleness he reserves for terrible news. Both of my Heavenly Joy teammates he mentioned had recently broken through. The middle stage one was now late stage. The late stage one was now foundation perfection. So, a hole in the ground with no witnesses, 1 grief-mad foundation perfection cultivator, 1 late-stage backup, and a boy they all thought was a lucky nobody a full realm beneath them. They were half right. I was a nobody, I just wasn't a lucky one. Lucky men don't survive this place. I'd survived it by being something worse. The demon cave was not a cave. It was a whole small world folded up inside the Sect's lake, grass and mountains and rivers under a false, shimmering sky, with a single beam of light falling in the far distance where the sealed demons slept. Beautiful, in the way a thing is beautiful right before it eats you. The moment we walked in, Gao Lei noted, cheerfully, that if a man died here, the enforcement hall wouldn't come looking. Message received. The demons were gorillas built out of rock. My sword sparked right off the first one's hide and did nothing, which was educational, so I stopped trying to cut them and started stabbing them in the one soft place they had, the neck, and the instant one of them dropped, 2 blue bubbles rose off the corpse and sank into me. Cultivation and blood, the same precious harvest I usually begged from the dirt, dropping out of dead monsters like loose change. I could have wept. Instead, I got to work, and I kept my face bored because Gao Lei was competing with me to land the killing blows, denying me the bubbles without even knowing that's what he was doing, and a man who looks too eager gets questions, so I played it small. I let the others take the easy kills. I dove for the hard ones, the neck strikes nobody wanted, and pocketed my quiet blue harvest while they thought I was just reckless. And Xiang called down lightning that split the gorillas open. Xuezhong froze them mid-charge. Shulan killed with a cold, disgusted efficiency, like the monsters were beneath the effort. And Gao Lei killed like it was personal, because for him, everything was. He watched me the whole month. Not the demons, me. Every time I dropped one clean, his smile got a little tighter, and once, over a fresh corpse, he said softly that I really did love stabbing things in the neck. Yes, I told him. The demons had thick hides but soft throats. He held my eyes a beat too long. We both knew we weren't talking about demons. We hunted as a pack for a month, because a pack was the one place the pavilion couldn't murder me in front of witnesses. Safety in numbers. I filled almost to the brim, one careful neck at a time, and then the demons thinned out. The reason to stay together thinned out with them, and Shulan said the 4 words I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. Let's split up. There it was. The witnesses were leaving, and every version of the next hour ended with me alone in a hole where the law never comes, hunted by a man who wanted me dead for love. Splitting up was a death sentence. It was also my only shot, so when we scattered, I ran. Full late foundation speed, then a hard change of direction the second I was out of sight, burning through the cave to put a country between me and the 2 people hunting me. Behind me, I knew Gao Lei was already on my trail with a tracking compass and a smile, and Shulan was behind him, and the 2 of them who despised the pavilion were writing me off as a dead man and heading for the exit. Xuezhong even said it out loud to An Xiang, poor junior brother Li, better to die quick than slow. They weren't wrong about the danger, they were wrong about the direction it pointed. Because I hadn't run to hide, I'd run to buy an hour. My pool was full, 100 and 100, and I needed exactly 1 uninterrupted stretch to spend it. I found a great spirit tree deep in the cave, folded myself into a hollow in its trunk, wrapped purple chi around me until I read as nothing, and I started to break through. To foundation perfection. The top of the whole realm, the last rung before the golden core. If I made it, I'd have a real chance. If Gao Lei found me first, I'd have a hole in my head. I was maybe 2/3 of the way up when I heard the woods go quiet outside, and a very pleased voice said, "Still trying to hide?" And a broadsword came down and split my tree in half. He'd aimed for the spot right between my eyes. What met the blade instead was a phantom shield of armor blooming out of nowhere to catch a killing blow meant for a man a full realm below him, because that soft little reward the acting sect leader had handed me for growing a flower turned out to eat golden core attacks for breakfast. Gao Lei's sword rang off it, and his triumph curdled into confusion, and in that one confused breath, I finished climbing. My eyes opened at foundation perfection. I'd like to describe the fight fairly, but there wasn't much fight to it. He came in for a second strike. I met it with the shadow blade and the demonic sound slash wrapped in purple chi, and the sound alone threw him into a tree hard enough to snap his broadsword and paint his hand red. Shulan arrived then, foundation perfection herself, cold and furious, and screamed at Gao Lei to join her, that a boy fresh off a breakthrough couldn't hold out against both of them. She was right about the arithmetic. She was wrong about the boy. Gao Lei spat blood into his own blade to strengthen it and came at my flank while Shulan pressed the front, the classic hammer and anvil, and it would have worked on almost anyone. I let a wisp of purple bleed to my fingertips, turned my head just enough to let his broadsword hiss past my ear, and flicked it with the back of 2 fingers. It snapped like an icicle. Before the pieces landed, my palm was on his chest, purple energy pouring through him, and whatever a man's ribs are supposed to do, his stopped doing it. Then it was just Shulan, staring at me with the one question everyone down there died asking: why is he so strong? I gave her a demonic sound slash edged in purple chi, a perfect arc of it, and she never got the answer. They both had backup plans, of course. People at that level always do. So before either of them could pull some dying trick, I spent 10 myriad sword talismans on the 2 of them, each one packing the punch of a foundation cultivator, and when the light faded, there was nothing left worth investigating. No neat corpse for the enforcement hall to read, no technique to trace, just a very quiet clearing. Then I coughed up a mouthful of blood, because forcing the Hongmeng Sutra through an unfinished breakthrough is not free, and sat down hard, and 5 demons walked out of the trees, drawn by the noise. When it rains, the universe checks whether you own an umbrella, and then it opens the window. A month later, I strolled out of the demon cave's exit, fully healed, entirely calm, carrying nothing but a report about how many demons I'd cleared. Shuizhong and Ansheng were already there, and I caught the tail end of a conversation I was clearly not meant to hear. Shuizhong, thinking out loud, working through it like a man solving his own murder. If the 2 from the pavilion don't come back, and only Li Wei does, then Li Wei killed a late stage and a perfection, which means he can kill a perfection. Which means the 2 of us, standing here at early and late foundation, are a problem he might prefer to erase. Then he looked up and saw me. I have never watched 2 people try so hard to look relaxed. They kept their distance. They kept a clear line to the exit. They agreed, very quickly and very warmly, that there was no need to wait for the others, that the mission was over, that we should all just head home. And I let them, because killing them would only raise the exact questions their silence was busy not asking. I'd walked into that cave the 5th wheel on a team assembled to keep me alive out of pity. I walked out of it as the thing 2 experienced cultivators were terrified to turn their backs on. Nobody said the word genius. They didn't have to. They'd done the math, and the math had a body count, and the body count was mine. I handed in my mission, collected a few hundred stones, and let Wang Cheng ask me, ever so casually, whether I'd happened to run into the 2 pavilion disciples who never came home. I hadn't, I told him. He nodded, and I read him one more time out of habit, and had to work not to laugh. Golden Core Peak now. The man was strolling up the realms like a tourist on a scenic staircase. At this rate, he was going to lap the entire sect before I finished my tea. Speaking of which, Zhao Yu turned up to collect on the spar he'd been promising me for months. He was middle stage foundation now, glowing with confidence, and he wanted our little duel set for the next morning. Fine, I said. I'd already decided to lose it. A quiet loss keeps a genius smug and unbothered is exactly how I like my geniuses. And then a voice like cool water said, from behind me, judging by your face, you plan to lose to him? She was in my courtyard again, in red, considering my flower. My heart did its one predictable, embarrassing thing. I bowed. She informed me, without asking, that if I beat Zhao Yu, instead of throwing the match, she would teach me a proper sword art in return. She left a book on my table, The 7 Styles of the Heavenly Blade, and made me pour her tea, and when she drank it, she frowned in a way that suggested my tea had personally disappointed her ancestors. Bring something drinkable next time, she said, and left, and I discovered a moment later that she'd taken my shadow blade with her on the way out, just pocketed it. The most powerful woman I'd ever met, and she moonlighted as a petty thief. I was going to spend a small fortune on tea leaves I couldn't afford so that a demoness wouldn't put me through a wall over a beverage. This was my life now. The next morning, I gave Zhao Yu exactly what he asked for, which was a lesson. He led with his strongest technique, a howling thunder sword, everything he had. I answered with one demonic sound slash. His thunder shattered, his blade cracked, and he sat down in the dirt with the specific expression of a young man discovering that the floor he'd been standing on was actually a ceiling. I'd meant to lose by a hair. I changed my mind mid-swing, because a man who beats you by a hair, you resent. A man who beats you by a mountain, you fear. And fear, unlike resentment, keeps its mouth shut. So I ended it in one move and let him blame a lucky encounter in the demon cave. Then, because I can't help myself, I appraised him. I wanted to know how badly I'd broken his spirit. The answer, not at all. He wasn't crushed. He wasn't plotting revenge. He'd simply decided to climb higher and challenge me again. And, the appraisal added, with the flat honesty of a home inspector, he genuinely believes I only won by luck. I sighed. Thank you for going easy on me, junior brother, I said, and meant none of it, and watched the cheerful genius walk off already planning his rematch. Some people you just can't teach. Honestly, it's part of his charm. A month of peace, and then the garden started to itch. Not a sound, not a face, just that prickle on the back of the neck that means someone is looking at you and doesn't want you to know. I turned it over, appraised a burly, bearded stranger among the outer disciples pretending to be a low-level chi refiner, and got a reading that sat me right down. Luoxia Sect, undercover at Leihuo Peak, recently broke through to early Golden Core. Came specifically to avenge Lin Mei, whom he loved, willing to die to kill you. I read that last part twice. Willing to die. Everything I'd built my survival on assumed my enemies wanted to keep living. The watch list, the clean kills, the whole delicate machine of leverage, all of it runs on people fearing consequences. A Golden Core cultivator who has already decided to trade his life for mine is a machine with the brakes cut. I couldn't out-scheme him. I couldn't out-threaten him. He'd walk into the Sect's worst punishment smiling, as long as he got to put his sword through me first. I still didn't understand it. Lin Mei was pretty, sure. There are 1,000 pretty women at Foundation establishment. But this man, this cultivator, with a long life and real status ahead of him, was ready to throw it all into a hole for her, and so, apparently, had half the Luoxia sect been. Whatever she'd done to inspire that, I hadn't seen it, and I'd killed her. Some questions you just carry. There was exactly one answer, and it was the same answer as always. Be stronger than the problem before the problem arrives. So I stopped going to the open garden. I sealed myself in my walled courtyard and farmed the flowers' blue bubbles day and night, chasing 100, while a dead man's grief walked slow circles around my house. Every morning I checked the pool. Every morning it was closer, and so was he. It was a race, and I was one number short, and the number was the difference between a golden core and a corpse. I learned the first form of the heavenly blade while I waited, moon slash, pure edge, nothing wasted, and I did the sensible, cowardly, correct thing. I reported the suspicious new disciple to Wang Cheng and let the enforcement hall's machine grind toward him. If I couldn't outfight a death seeker, I could at least sick the law on him and buy a night. They moved that night. Raided the moles across the peaks all at once. Jinzhou Heng slipped the trap, wounded, and did the one thing a sane man wouldn't. Instead of running for his life, he came for mine. A death seeker doesn't run, he collects. And that same night, in my quiet room, with an assassin bleeding his way toward my door, I finally shoved the last of my hoarded power through the wall. The bottleneck cracked. A tiny golden core condensed in my center and began to drink in everything around it, growing solid, growing heavy, until it hung there complete and radiant and mine. Golden Core. From the 9th layer of chi refining to the Golden Core in under 2 years, a road most men spend a century failing to walk. I opened my eyes in the dark, felt the new weight of myself settle into place, and thought, good. Because at dawn, a man who couldn't be frightened was going to come to my stream to die, and I wanted to be the one who decided how. He was there when the first light came, standing on the far bank, clothes torn, blood at his arm and his waist. We looked at each other across the water. You can't run, he said. I'm not going to run, I told him. You're waiting to be rescued. Don't. The ones who came for me are trapped in my technique. No one's coming before dawn. His face twisted. Why did you kill her? Why did you kill junior sister Lin Mei? She was a traitor, I said, and it was true, and it didn't matter. And I began, very quietly, to gather my strength. He didn't hear the answer. He was already somewhere else. He told me what she'd been to him, that when he was weak, when everyone else was pushing him out and stepping on him, she was the one who stayed, that she'd been the single light in a dark room, that she'd given him a reason to climb, and he'd climbed, step by step, past all the people who'd laughed at him because of her. But you killed her, he said, and his eyes were wet with something older than rage. I could not beat his fear because he had none. I could not beat his hate because it made him faster. So I did the only thing left, the cruelest thing in my whole quiet toolbox. I put down my weapon in my voice and picked up his. Then let's remember, I said gently. Before you try to kill me, remember her. Remember how good she was to you. Go back just for a moment to the times she stayed. And he did. I watched it happen. Watched a man who had walked 100 miles to die drop his guard and fall backward into the one warm room he had left, her voice telling him she'd cook for him if he won, her asking if her sect robes looked nice, her promising she liked him, that of course someone liked him. A smile touched his face without his permission. For one breath, he wasn't an assassin at my stream. He was a lonely man, happy, remembering. The moonslash crossed the water while he was smiling. His thoughts stopped in the middle of that smile. He looked at me, unable to understand where the light had gone, and then he went down on the bank, and the last thing his eyes held onto was the sunrise, and the last thing his mind held onto was her, turning to smile at him. That's fine then, I thought he said. Maybe I imagined it. I stood over him a long time. I don't know if she was really kind to him. I never met that Lin Mei. The one I met put a sword to my back and tried to trade my life for hers. Maybe she was two women. Maybe he only kept the half that was warm and let the rest fall away, the way we all do with the people we can't stop loving. The truth and the lie of her were both in the past now, past mending, past mattering. All that was left was a man who'd remembered her one last time, on the ground, with a smile. I'm not a heartless person. I want that on the record too. But I want to live, and he wanted me not to. And in that whole tender scene, there was only ever going to be one of us left standing at the end. So I put the knife away, and I told my master a small story about a foundation stage disciple and a stranger's sword I'd found in the demon cave, and I let the sunrise dry the stream. Some mornings, you win. You just don't always feel like you did. The next thing that tried to spy on me was a rabbit. I want to be clear about that because it's important and because it went on to become the single most exhausting relationship of my life. It turned up in the garden as a small, fast, white thing tearing through the herb beds, and after I finally pinned it down and appraised it, the picture got funnier and worse. It was a deceit beast, planted by yet another sect I'd apparently offended, carrying a treasure inside it that could track the heavenly fragrance flower, and buried under that, a bloodline that could be woken up by feeding it spirit stones, one at a time, over days. Everyone, human or beast, had come to spy on my backyard. Even the wildlife had an agenda. Hong Yuye arrived before I could decide what to do with it, plucked the tracking treasure straight out of the thing with 2 fingers like she was pitting a fruit, tossed the very confused rabbit back at me, and told me to keep it. The demoness, deleting my enemy's surveillance and gifting me a pet in the same bored gesture. I'd stopped questioning her a while ago, so I did the only sensible thing with a beast that dropped bubbles when its bloodline woke. I hung it up by a rope and fed it spirit stones. 7 days in, its power shifted, and up floated a bubble in a color even better than the flower's gold. Pure gold. A golden legend, the world called it. I'd been climbing a ladder of colors for years, and this was a rung I hadn't known was up there. The rabbit, meanwhile, woke up smart. Very smart. And it decided, immediately and permanently, that it was a great and terrible demon lord. Master, it announced, the first full day it could talk, hanging upside down from my rope like a fuzzy little bat. Everyone on the path gives Lord Rabbit face. You should stick close to me. It makes you look good. I looked at this creature I had personally hung from a tree. You're hanging from a tree. A temporary strategic position, said Lord Rabbit. I kept feeding it, because 2 more months of gold bubbles finished the set, and when the golden legend came due, the world reached into chaos and handed me a blade. It fell out of nothing and buried itself in my floor. A silver-white blade the length of a man's arm, so heavy with intent that the air around it went cold, and everything in me wanted to pick it up and split the sky. The appraisal read like scripture. The primordial heavenly blade, forged in chaos, carrying the essence of the beginning. A natal weapon, bound to my life, growing as I grow, sharpening as I sharpen. In my hand, it whispered that I could cut down anyone at early golden core with a single stroke, and I believed it, and I felt myself start to swell with it, and I put it right back down. Because that's the thing about a weapon like that. It makes you arrogant, and arrogance is just death with good posture. So I hid it. I kept using cheap breakable swords in public, all of them named Half Moon because I went through them like a man goes through chopsticks, and I tucked a blade forged before the world existed into my belt as a card I would only play once. The rabbit watched me hide it. Master, it said solemnly, if you're ever in trouble, don't worry. I, Lord Rabbit, will protect you. I had a natal weapon from the dawn of creation and a talking rabbit with delusions of grandeur, and I want you to understand that both of them were going to save my life. I just didn't know which one I'd end up more grateful for. Around then, the whole sect went to war with a neighboring one called Tianqing Mountain, which mostly meant my garden got busier and my problems got weirder. The spies stopped being charming and started being explosive. One afternoon I caught 4 men burying a treasure in the spirit field, not seducing anyone, not smiling, just quietly planting a bomb in the soil to blow the whole cliff's livelihood to pieces. I appraised the one I left breathing, a puppet, seeded 10 years ago by a heavenly saint sect senior sister named Shen Li, grown in a real person's skin until it forgot it wasn't one. 10 years. Somebody had planted a sleeper in a child a decade back on the off chance it would one day be useful against my sect. I filed the name Shen Li under problems for later and had no idea how soon later would be. The rabbit, for its part, was thriving. It had appointed itself Lord of the Garden, terrorized the ordinary workers with its reputation, and developed opinions about food. "Bring me people to eat," it announced one morning to a horrified helper. "Officials, nobles, not commoners. Commoners suffer too much, the flavor's off." Then it caught me looking at it, went pale under the fur, and pivoted without a breath. "Carrots. I meant carrots. I only eat carrots. Right, master?" "Right," I said, and moved on, because I did not have the strength that day. The good times ended, as they do, with a favor I couldn't refuse. My senior brother Guangshan turned up at the garden gate, pale and coughing, claiming a nasty injury from the mining field and asking me to cover his post there for a while. I appraised him and nearly laughed. He wasn't hurt. He'd stumbled onto some ancient inheritance down in the mines and faked the wound to get home and quietly digest it, and he was handing me his dangerous, undesirable job as the price of his good luck. I couldn't say no. Refusing a true disciple's request just gets you assigned the same job by the sect anyway, minus the goodwill. So I left the rabbit to water the flower, and I went down to the one place in the sect nobody volunteers for. The mining field sat out on the sect's ragged edge, a walled town built around a wound in the mountain, where the enemies we captured in the war were sent to dig until they died. My new boss was a scarred golden core brute named Gang, who liked to slap prisoners as punctuation, and my new co-workers were the kind of people who'd knife you for your dinner. And the whole place hummed with a low, buried power because something old and enormous slept at the bottom of that hole, and everyone with a brain wanted it. I'd come expecting to hate it. Instead, on my first day, I picked up a pickaxe out of pure idle curiosity, and it turned out to be the single best decision I made all year, because when I chipped a chunk of good ore loose, a bubble rose off it and sank into me. I nearly dropped the pick. All these years I'd been coaxing bubbles out of flowers 1 drop a day, tending, waiting, hiding, and here was a mountain that just bled them. I mined harder, white, green, and then, off a rich vein, blue. 10 blue bubbles before lunch. 10. The flower gave me 2 every 3 days. This hole gave me a decade's worth of patience in a morning, and all I had to do was swing a pickaxe like a man who loved his job. So I became, to everyone's confusion, the most enthusiastic miner in the history of forced labor. Picture the place. A scarred golden core brute named Gang ran my crew, and he communicated primarily through slapping. The workers were captured cultivators from the war, dead-eyed, worked past exhaustion, digging because the alternative was worse. The supervisors expected the new inner sect boy to lean on a wall and bark orders. Instead, the new inner sect boy grabbed a pick and outdug the prisoners and kept doing it all day, every day, grinning at rocks like they owed him money. They thought I'd lost my mind. Let them. I throttled the power carefully, just enough to look like a middling foundation cultivator, never a drop of the real amount, and I mined like the ore had insulted my mother. White bubbles, green, and off the rich veins, blue by the fistful. A late-stage golden core somewhere was frowning at my tea, and I was down a hole getting rich in the one currency that mattered, one swing at a time. I even patched up an injured old miner with a healing pill nobody expected me to waste, because he reminded me of every mortal I'd ever sent quietly off to town. It confused everybody. The prisoners started watching me the way you watch weather you can't read. Meanwhile, I'd found the fastest cultivation cheat of my life, and it was disguised as the worst job in the sect, and I was not about to let anyone talk me out of it. There was, naturally, a catch, and this time the catch had a face. 4 of the prisoners in my cave were wrong. They read as broken key refiners, but I appraised them and found 4 golden core cultivators wearing seals like cheap disguises, a rescue cell sent to blow the mine apart and free their captured people, with maybe 2 weeks before their plan locked into place. Their leader was a smiling man named Duan Li, and here's the strange part. He clocked me right back. Not my strength. He couldn't see through the purple. Just a feeling. He told the others flatly that whatever their eyes said, they should try very hard not to make me an enemy. Smart man. Wasted on the wrong sect. And then there was my new manager, who took me off Gang's hands with a smile so warm it made my skin crawl. Shen Li. The same Shen Li who'd planted a puppet in a child 10 years ago. She had come to the mine to hunt its secret. She had noticed me the day I destroyed her puppet in the garden, and per my appraisal she now wanted, very badly, to make me into a puppet of my own. She just needed the right moment. She watched my mining numbers climb and glowed with it, the way you'd glow at a prize hog fattening up nicely. I had a ticking bomb in my cave, a puppet maker for a boss, and a 2-week clock. So I did the only thing that ever helps. I dug faster. The one bright spot was learning exactly how mean I was allowed to be down there. On a bad day, a spoiled prisoner, a Zhuantian elder's daughter, raised on the assumption the world owed her comfort, demanded I heal her the way I just healed an injured old miner, indignant that a captive of her breeding should get less. I looked at her. I laid my sheathed blade against her throat, didn't even draw it, and opened a thin red line with the scabbard's edge. Can we mine? I asked, pleasantly. She could suddenly mine. She mined beautifully. Turns out the fastest cure for a sense of entitlement is a very calm question asked at the correct distance. Our output went up 30% that afternoon, and Shen Li liked me even more, which was the last thing I needed from the woman planning to hollow me out and wear me. I dug like the world was ending, because for that, mine it was. I filled my pool and stepped up to the middle stage of the golden core in the dark of my little quarters. One more rung climbed behind the purple. And on the day the bomb finally went off, I made sure I was already moving. The whole mine bucked. Stone rained. Duan Li's cell tore off their seals and ran. Shen Li came gliding into the cave to collect the puppet she'd been fattening, and I was already gone before either of them arrived, because the one thing worse than a puppet maker at your back is a puppet maker and a jailbreak at your back. She followed me anyway. She was good at it, and she was enjoying it. I could feel her savoring the hunt, a little knife already out for the part where she opened my chest. I let her chase me all the way to a cave with a river of lava down its middle, and there I stopped running and turned it around. The daggers did nothing. The spirit swords did nothing. She didn't bleed because there was nothing in her to bleed. She'd made herself into a puppet years ago. No heart to stop, no throat to cut, and she twisted her head all the way around on her neck to smile at me and ask when I'd figured her out. So I stopped looking for a soft place, and I made one. I raised the Heavenly Blade's second form, mountain suppression, and brought 100,000 mountains of pressure straight down on top of her. There's no vital point to miss when you simply erase the whole target. When the dust cleared, there wasn't enough of Shen Li left to wear anything, and I swept every last scrap of her into the lava and the blood-stained stones after it, and only then did I let my shoulders down. I'd barely started for the exit when the cell came pouring through the same cave. Their other road was blocked, and there was Duan Li at the back of them, meeting my eyes. He didn't fight. He gave a little bow, said what a coincidence, said he wouldn't dream of troubling me, and led his people across the lava and away. Smart to the end, but two of his weren't so wise. Ruan Lan and Huo Ming doubled back to put the dangerous nobody in the ground while they had the chance, and Duan Li let them go, because his gut told him not to walk back into that cave, and he trusted his gut over his friends. Huo Ming was genuinely frightening. He could shrink his own presence down to nothing, blend into a rock, make you look at him and see empty air. If I hadn't spent months bleeding through a nameless master's manual on reading exactly those tells, his opening strike would have ended me. Instead, I caught it, let the purple bloom, and let him see the golden core he'd bet his life I didn't have. He had just enough time to be surprised. Then Ruan Lan, who'd come to help him, got a mountain suppression for her trouble, and the lava took them both, and the cave went quiet. 3 sabotage cell members sent to erase me, 1 puppet maker who'd been raising me like livestock, all of them, into the fire. I stood at the edge of a lava river, a dozen fathoms under a demonic sect, a boy who'd been sold for 2 corn buns, and thought, with no drama at all, I really need to get out of this hole before it asks anything else of me. The hole was not done asking. I climbed out of the mine straight into a fight so far above my head I couldn't even see the top of it, power that made my brand new golden core feel like a candle at a bonfire. A hulking senior brother named Jiang, one of the sect's 10 chief disciples, had cornered a fleeing Xuantian sect prodigy called Long Jian, who was halfway into a teleport array and about to vanish with a small fortune of the sect's enemies. Jiang, pinned by a trick and unable to reach him, saw me and bellowed at me to stop him. Now, I had exactly no intention of interfering in a fight 3 realms above my weight class, but you don't ignore a chief disciple. So I did the smallest, most token thing I could. I flicked 1 cheap myriad sword talisman at the array purely for show, fully expecting it to bounce off and let me go home. It did not bounce off. It punched clean through the teleport formation, unraveled the whole thing, and buried itself in Long Jian's thigh. His escape collapsed. He turned, mid-vanish, and gave me a look of such pure personal loathing that I swear I felt a hatred bubble try to form over his head. I had, with 1 talisman I'd meant as a polite gesture, robbed a Xuantian prodigy of his getaway and made an enemy for life. Jiang laughed like it was the best thing he'd seen all war, slammed the prodigy into the dirt, and generously insisted on giving me every scrap of the credit. That was the disaster. See, everyone else in that sect would have wept for a chief disciple to hand them the glory of capturing a legend. For me, it was a catastrophe, because a hero who does the sect a service that large gets rewarded, and the biggest reward on offer was getting my name struck off the enforcement hall's watch list. And the watch list, that humiliating brand I'd worn like a scarlet letter, was the one wall keeping the Heavenly Joy Pavilion from openly murdering me. Kill a man under active investigation, and you answer to the enforcement hall. Kill a cleared nobody, and you answer to no one. Being a suspect was my armor. They were about to take it off me as a prize. So I did something I'm fairly sure no one in the history of the sect had done before. I fought quietly and desperately to stay a suspect. Wang Cheng, bless his bored little heart, understood immediately and found me the loophole. Shen Li had officially vanished, presumed a traitor, last seen by me, so instead of Li Wei, hero of the mine, I became Li Wei, suspected of colluding with the fugitive traitor Shen Li and leaking the mine's secrets. Right back on the list, under investigation. Beautifully, gloriously suspicious. I have never been so relieved to be accused of treason in my life. The war ended with the sect on top. The mine held its buried secret, and a merit list went up ranking me 10th in the entire sect. 10th, out of everyone. The timing was exquisite. That very morning, Zhao Yu had cornered me to describe, at length, his own war contributions, real ones, earned by a real genius who'd fought hard for them, and he'd wanted me to know how far ahead of his flower-tending senior brother he'd finally pulled. I congratulated him warmly. I meant it, mostly. Then the list went up that afternoon with his name somewhere respectable and mine at number 10, above his, above almost everyone's, because I'd bagged a primordial spirit prodigy with a talisman I'd thrown as a joke. I'm told his expression was worth the price of admission. I didn't get to see it. I was too busy being grateful for a treason charge and going home to pretend, once more, that I only knew how to grow flowers. It's a strange life, outranking geniuses by accident and then fighting to keep your criminal record clean so nobody notices. But it was my life, and I'd stopped expecting it to make sense a long time ago. For once, the sect paid me. Guangshan, guilty about the mine job, cashed out his rewards to me, the better part of 2,000 stones. For a man who used to count coins in the double digits, it was a dizzying fortune, and I did with it what any sensible person would. I went to buy a decent knife and some tea a demoness wouldn't wall me over, which is how I got robbed. 2 smiling brothers at a market stall sold me a fine black blade, palmed a switch on the box, and then leaned on me with the pressure of 2 foundation perfection cultivators, daring the harmless boy to make a scene. I let them. I walked off meek and cheated. Then I appraised them, found the cursed little dice they used to swap faces and vanish, followed them into the dark, and quietly took my knife back off their bodies along with everything else they'd stolen from everyone before me. Turns out a con that had run for years on the assumption that nobody dangerous ever looked poor had finally sold to the wrong poor man. I named the recovered knife Half Moon because that's what I named all of them and went home. Hong Yuye was waiting, of course. She caught me the instant I used appraisal in her presence, felt the tiny cost of it, the way she felt everything, and instead of blasting me into the wall, she looked almost disappointed. "Your technique is crude," she said. "It's in the book I gave you, if you'd bothered to finish it." And it turned out my one true window on the world could itself be hidden, folded into a breath, spent so quietly that not even she would feel it. She taught me that over tea and upgraded the single most useful ability I owned from loud to silent. I should explain the tea because the tea had become a whole thing. She came to check on her flower every so often, and every visit followed the same liturgy. She'd sit, she'd point at the pot, I'd make tea, she'd drink it, and frown, as if the leaves had personally let down her family, and on the visits where the tea was truly bad, she'd knock me into a wall with a flick of her aura, never to hurt, just to comment. My cheekbones learned the taste of my own plaster on a schedule, so I did what any reasonable man being periodically wall-slammed over beverages would do. I went broke buying good tea. I'd earned a small fortune, and I was spending it a pinch at a time on leaves I couldn't pronounce, so that the most powerful woman alive wouldn't frown, and every time she left, a teacup left with her, just gone, pocketed. The Tianyin witch, terror of the cultivation world, quietly building a collection of my crockery one visit at a time. She kept arming me, a legendary manual here, a fatal technique there. She kept robbing me of teacups. I'd genuinely stopped being able to tell the two apart, and I'd stopped trying, because the truth underneath it all was one I wasn't ready to say out loud yet. Those visits were the only ones in my entire life where nobody was pretending. She wanted my flour and my tea and, apparently, my dishes, and she never once smiled a lie at me to get them. In a sect made of masks, the scariest woman in it was the only person who never wore one around me. I'd have paid the tea money twice for that. Then the sect, flush with war loot, held a tournament to hand out the best of it, and my rank dropped me straight into the bracket for a set of prizes worth killing over. I won it the boring way, one demonic sound slash per opponent, more or less, throttled down to look like a hard-fought thing. But 2 matches stuck with me. One was Zhao Yu, of course, still convinced our last duel was a fluke, still cheerfully certain the next one was his. It wasn't. He took it well, which is his one genuinely admirable quality. The other was Su Ling, the kind senior sister from White Moon Lake, the one who'd looked at me like a person back when I was pouring lava for a living. Turned out she was the strongest mid-foundation cultivator up on that lake, and she fought with a whip of red silk that nearly took my head off twice because I appraised her mid-fight. I couldn't help it. She has a rare gift. She can feel malice, feel it coming. Every strike I meant to land, some quiet instinct pulled her out of the way of, not because she was faster, but because she could taste the intent behind it, a genuinely good heart with a sixth sense for bad ones. In an orthodox immortal sect, she'd have soared. Stuck here, in a nest of masks, she just kept dodging killing blows on reflex and being nice to people who didn't deserve it. I won by putting the blade to her shoulder before her instincts could finish reading me, and she conceded with a smile that held no grudge at all. I made a second private note, filed right beside the first: protect Su Ling, if it ever comes to it. The list of people in that sect I actually liked was short. I wasn't going to lose one to carelessness. And when it came time to pick a prize, I walked past the god-tier blade and the flying robe and the rest of it, and I chose the one item the referee openly called useless, a plain dark seed nobody could identify. I could identify it. The immortal peach tree, a dying seed that watered a single bowl a day and passed through 9 rebirths, becomes a divine tree, sweet fruit and all. Another live coal. Another thing to grow in my crowded, dangerous little yard. Everyone thought I'd chosen the scraps. I'd chosen the only prize in the room that would still be feeding me in 100 years. I planted it beside the flower and gave it its bowl of water, and Lord Rabbit immediately began plotting to lick it, and that more or less was the secret shape of my whole life. To the sect, I was the harmless flower boy at the bottom of the cliff. Above average talent, no backing, a suspicious little charity case who pours lava and paints cheap talismans and gets bullied at market. That was the man everyone saw. Underneath the purple, I was a golden core, with a natal blade from the dawn of creation, a garden of divine plants, a shelf of legendary techniques, and armor that ate the attacks of gods, growing a hair stronger every single day, in a yard nobody looked at twice. Beside a flower the whole world would burn the sect down to own. 2 men in one skin. The one everyone underestimated, and the one I couldn't afford to let anyone meet. That's the trick. If you ever find yourself the smallest thing in a nest of monsters, you don't get strong and then hide it. You hide completely, forever, and get strong in the dark. One bubble, one bowl of water, one quiet morning at a time. It is the most boring superpower in the world. It is also the only reason I'm alive to tell you about it. The rabbit, for the record, never did manage to lick the flower. Every time he tried, the demoness happened to visit, and every time she visited, he learned a fresh new way to fly into a wall. Even my pet was living a double life. His was just funnier. Between the mine, the flower, and now a second divine plant tipping bubbles into me every few days, my pool filled faster than it ever had. I stepped up one last time, quietly, in the dark. Golden core completion. The same realm Wang Chung had been at when I met him. Back when he'd been a mountain, and I'd been a mouse. He was 3 whole stages higher now and climbing, but for the first time, standing in my own courtyard, I felt the gap between me and the terrifying people close by exactly 1 inch. 1 inch. It doesn't sound like much, but I'd started at 2 corn buns, so I'd learned to be grateful for inches. By now, let me be honest with you about my social life. It was spies. It was entirely spies. Everyone who got close to me wanted the flower. I stopped being surprised and started keeping a tally. A sweet senior sister from Yanyun Peak named Tang Yue came around every so often, warm as sunshine, and my appraisal read, "Undercover Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Saint Sect, ruthless, a knife behind the smile." She'd bring me a sick plant to fix, chat, warn me about the very danger she was part of, then leave right as it got friendly. Hot then cold then gone, playing a game a younger me might have fallen for. The younger me didn't have a poison that turns pretty into furniture, so I fixed her plant, took her warnings, and filed her with the rest. And there were a lot of the rest. A senior sister who suddenly wanted my opinion on spirit medicine. Golden core, undercover. A helpful new face at the garden gate. Golden core, undercover. It got to where I'd appraise someone, get spy, and just sigh. Another one. It was like living in a house where every single visitor is a burglar casing the place, except the burglars bring tea and compliments, and one of them is a candidate saint. You'd think that would make a man cold. It did the opposite. Because there was one group in that whole sect that wanted nothing from me at all, the ordinary people, the mortals who tended the herbs, hauled the water, cooked the meals, no cultivation, no leverage, no angle, just people, sold or stolen into a demonic sect the way I'd been sold into it, living small and scared, one bad mood of an inner disciple away from a beating. So I was decent to them, unfashionably decent. I didn't let them get worked to death on a rush order. When the old ones couldn't keep up, I didn't have them thrown out. I sent them to a nearby town with enough silver to be comfortable, if they wanted to go. It cost me almost nothing, and it made me, in the eyes of the whole demonic sect, a suspiciously nice young man, which is its own kind of danger. I didn't care. I remembered being 4 years old and chopping firewood with arms too small for the axe. I knew exactly what it was to be the smallest thing in someone else's house. The cultivators all thought that made me weak. The mortals all prayed I'd stay in charge, and I let both of them think whatever kept them out of my way and went home to a talking rabbit that had recently developed ambitions. "Master," Lord Rabbit announced from the fence, gnawing a carrot the outer sect kids kept bringing him as tribute. "I'm going down the mountain to walk the path of a great demon." "Have fun," I said. He was back by afternoon. He'd decided, he explained with great dignity, that his true calling was protecting me, which was rabbit, for I got scared and missed dinner. I let him keep the story. Everyone needs one. The next enemy never showed me his face. His name was Mo Ran, and he was the first person who scared me without ever being in the room. He worked through plants. The 100-bone forest boarded their medicine in my garden, and one of those medicines turned out to be a mutant flower of Mo Ran's design that quietly drained the soil dead. Another, planted in the woods, breathed out an invisible seal that jammed my own cultivation cold, a technique with no color, no sound, no trace, that stalled me for a month before I even understood I was being attacked. I finally broke it by planting a black lotus, and I still never saw him coming. A man who can reach into your life through the roots of a flower is a man you cannot punch. What I could punch was his errand boy. A Foundation-late thug named Joe Bo came to collect on the ruined flowers his own side had poisoned, and blamed the damage on me. Then he generously sold me the cure, some overpriced beads to fix the soil, and shook me down for 2,500 stones on top, all with a smile, all on a payment plan with interest, the way you bleed a cow you intend to keep. I appraised him while he gloated. He was working for a Golden Core true disciple named Ku Feng. He thought me exactly what I was pretending to be, rich, timid, and too scared to fight back. And he'd report to his master in 7 days. Mo Ran's name wasn't even in it. Mo Ran was above Ku Feng, who was above Joe Bo, who stood there smiling in my ruined garden, thinking he'd found himself a nice, reliable cow. I paid the down payment. I smiled back, and I made a note of the 7 days, because that was exactly how long I had before the errand boy walked me straight to the next rung of a ladder I couldn't see the top of, so I climbed as much of it as I could reach. I paid Joe Bo a down payment, followed him that night to Ku Feng's courtyard, and the instant the true disciple handed his thug a reward pill, I put a spear through the thug's skull and a mountain suppression through the true disciple, and took everything they had. 2 kills, one of them a genuine true disciple, and still no closer to the face at the top. I did come away with something new. Somewhere in there my third divine ability had matured, hidden spirit reappearance, a reserve of my own power folded away behind my brow, ready to pour back into me at the worst moment as a hidden second wind, a spare tank. In a life like mine, you can never have too many spare tanks. And then the bill for killing a true disciple came due, and it nearly finished me. Because a dead true disciple is a very different weather system than a dead spy, Wang Cheng arrived with 2 enforcers and the specific politeness of an arrest, and mentioned as gently as ever that when they took me in for questioning, they'd be searching my storage ring, which at that moment held 3,000 of Mo Ran's stolen nutrient beads, a small armory of mysterious loot, and roughly 1 confession's worth of evidence that I'd murdered a true disciple. They walked me to a holding cell to wait for the search. And for the first time since a demoness put a sword to my throat, I genuinely could not see the way out. I sat on a straw mat in a stone room, with the truth of every one of my killings sitting in a ring on my finger, and I understood that I had 2 days, no allies I trusted, and nowhere to hide the one thing that would send me into the lawless tower. I want you to remember exactly how doomed I was in that room, because I was about to be saved by a rabbit. He came in through the window slot near the ceiling, wriggling his fat little head through a gap no beast his size should fit, entirely unbothered by the formation that was supposed to keep everything out. "Master," said Lord Rabbit, dropping to the floor, "buy me a collar." I stared at him. "How did you get in here?" "The formation gave Lord Rabbit face," he said, "and didn't report me." Which was nonsense, except it wasn't. I appraised him, and found that my ridiculous pet had sometime while I wasn't paying attention, awakened a genuine divine ability. He could thin his own presence to nothing and slip a simple formation like a ghost through a curtain. The most useless creature I owned had grown, in secret, into the one thing that could walk into a sealed cell and out again unseen. I have never loaded a storage ring so fast in my life. Every bead, every blade, every scrap of evidence off my finger and onto his collar, and then out the window he went with all my sins in a little iron ring, off to bury them in the shell of an old turtle he'd befriended in the river, because of course he had. I sat back down on my straw mat, empty-handed and innocent, and started to breathe again, which is when the temperature dropped, and a chair and a teapot appeared out of nothing, and Hong Yuye was sitting in my cell. "You really do love terrible little rooms," she said. "It's either a mine or a cage with you." She pointed at the pot. I made tea. In a holding cell under the enforcement hall with a demoness who could have walked me out through the wall, I brewed tea and she frowned at it and she stayed. She stayed far longer than she ever stayed anywhere, sitting, sipping, watching me, and I understood slowly that she was waiting for me to ask her for help, to owe her, to hand her the leverage. I didn't ask. I'd already bet my life on a rabbit, and a rabbit doesn't ask for your soul in return, it asks for a collar. So I poured, and I said nothing, and eventually she stood and gave me a look cold enough to frost the stone. Next time I come, she said, I would prefer you weren't here. And she was gone. The interrogation, when it came, was almost funny. 3 elders in a dark room, firing questions that made no sense. Was the dead man happy or despairing when he died? How many stones were in his ring? Questions with no right answers. All of them soaked in a charm technique meant to shake loose a confession from a rattled mind. But I don't have a rattleable mind anymore. A demoness fixed that with a kick and a pill. I answered flat and clean. They searched my innocent empty ring. They found nothing, and they let me go. I only realized the worst part later. There'd been a young man among the 3, quiet, deferring to no one. And when I put the pieces together, I went cold, all over. Mo ran. The faceless mastermind I'd been hunting up a ladder of corpses had been sitting 3 feet away the whole time, a true disciple buried inside the enforcement hall itself, ranked above the very elders who'd been questioning me. I'd been looking everywhere for his face. It had been on the other side of the table, taking notes. They let me out on the strength of my merit. On the way home, Wang Chung warned me, kindly, that I'd become far too visible. Too many dead men, too high a rank, too many traitors in my orbit, and that Mo Ran, wherever he was, had almost certainly noticed. Then, out of habit, I appraised the only friend I had. True disciple of the vast heaven sect. Bored. Watched a dragon soul try to possess him, found it too slow, swallowed half of it to speed things along, and is now, currently, being quietly possessed in return by the very dragon he was toying with. I looked at the man walking beside me, chatting pleasantly, apparently unaware that the dragon he'd bullied for fun was winning, and I decided, for the second time, that there was absolutely nothing I could safely say. In a demonic sect, even the monsters have monsters. You just learn to nod and keep your appraisals to yourself and go home to your rabbit, who that week brought me a problem. My mortals had started falling sick. Pale, hollow-eyed, wrung out, a couple of them collapsing in the rows, dreaming every night, they said, of the same beautiful woman calling them into the woods. Then Lord Rabbit hopped up on the fence with a look of deep moral concern and reported that he'd seen a woman out among the trees eat a man right up. Eat him, I said. Right up, the rabbit confirmed, solemn as a judge. Very rude. Something was hunting the weakest people in my garden, so I went hunting it. I found the trail, and then I did something I'd never had the strength to do before. I turned my own concealment inward and pressed my cultivation down and down until I read as a scrawny third-layer chi refiner the exact flavor of helpless prey she was fishing for. Then I walked into the woods wearing Bates' clothes. She was waiting under the moon, all disheveled beauty and open invitation, pouring out a charm strong enough to walk a grown man off a cliff smiling. It rolled over me and found nothing to hold, because of course it did. A demoness had killed that particular weakness in me a long time ago with a kick and a pill, and every predator who's tried to use my heart against me since has come away confused. The appraisal, when I spent it, was almost sad. A soulless clone of some far-off mercenary sect, sent to feed on essence, memory blank so it couldn't betray its master if caught, a thing built to prey on the powerless and report home. It looked at me, expecting a dazed farm boy. I let my real self come back all at once. I didn't kill it. That's a law enforcement headache, and I had enough of those. I knocked it cold with the flat of my blade and let the enforcers cart it off, and my mortals stopped dreaming, and the rows filled back up. Nobody thanked me, because nobody knew, which was fine. I hadn't done it for thanks. I'd done it because a long time ago, I was the smallest thing in the garden too, and nobody came for me, and I decided, somewhere along the way, that on my one small patch of a monstrous world, that was going to be different, even if the only witness was a rabbit with a flair for the dramatic. A while later, the sect sent me out to help recruit new disciples, and I picked up a problem I didn't regret. Her name was Hua Qing. She came up the mountain in a line of hopefuls, a ragged farm girl, maybe 12 or 13, and when the talent test declared her worthless, not a flicker of spiritual root, she looked at the jade slip like it had personally betrayed her. But I'd been watching her, and my eyes see things the tests don't. There was no spiritual energy in her at all. There was, instead, a tide of physical power under her skin so vast it should have been impossible, banked and hidden like a furnace behind a farmhouse door. I appraised her, and the answer took its time coming, because it wasn't built for ordinary reading. Dragon Clan. Talent beyond normal measure. Struck down by heavenly thunder, memory and strength lost, fallen into a river, pulled out by an old couple who kept her 3 years and finally sent her to the sect because she ate too much for 2 poor old people to feed. A dragon, amnesiac, powerless, sold to a demonic sect by the family that couldn't afford her because she ate too much during a hard year. You can see why I kept her. She was immediately a disaster. She worked like an ox and refused absolutely to read. Put a book in front of her and she fell asleep between one word and the next. The instructors made her stand as punishment. She slept standing up. They tried binding techniques to keep her in place. She waited them out and left the moment the dinner bell rang because nothing, not discipline, not power, not the threat of expulsion, ranked above her next meal. She'd mutter that she would rather die than read and mean it and go eat. The outer sect had no idea what to do with a talentless girl who couldn't be managed and quietly couldn't be beaten either, since a body full of dragon strength doesn't much notice a chi refiner's stick. So they did what everyone did with their problems. They shoved her onto me. Lord Rabbit adopted her on sight. She grabbed him, squeezed his cheeks, declared him cute, a mortal insult to a self-styled demon lord, and instead of fleeing, he decided magnanimously that he'd allow it. "Call me Big Brother," he told her, "and I'll protect you." 2 of them now. My household was a talking rabbit with a hero complex and a dragon who wouldn't read. I took them both to a meal to sort her out, and that's where she broke something in me I thought had scarred over years ago. Because at the end of the meal, when she'd eaten everything in reach, she carefully wrapped the last untouched pastry in paper and tucked it away. "For later?" I asked. "For Grandpa and Grandma," she said, and her whole face lit up with it. "They've never had anything this good. Grandpa's hair is all white and he can't chop the firewood anymore, so I do it. Grandma can't thread a needle, so I do that too. They can't chew hard things, but this is soft. They'll love it. And then, hopefully, when can I go home and see them?" I sat there and could not speak for a moment. Home. I hadn't thought that word in a long time. My family had handed me 2 corn buns and a door. Hers had gone hungry to keep her 3 years longer than they could afford, and wept when they finally sent her somewhere she'd be fed, and she had turned around and carried a stolen dessert back to them like treasure. Same road, opposite direction, and it opened a seam in me I'd have sworn was scar tissue. "Learn the opening sutra," I told her. "Reach the first layer of chi refining, and I'll send you home to visit. I'll buy you food to bring." She looked at the book like it was a snake. "That," I said, "is entirely up to how much you want to see them." She read. Of course she read. And being a dragon, she cleared the first layer in days, even refusing to study, even barely trying, and I sent her home with an escort and a purse and a quiet word to check, without telling her, exactly how the old couple's health was holding up. When the escort came back, the report was gentle and terrible. The grandparents were past 60 and failing and would not last many more years. Watching's grandmother had sent home a bundle of plain homemade snacks to thank the senior brother who'd let her girl come see them. I ate one. It tasted of nothing special, of an ordinary kitchen, of a home that had wanted a child it couldn't keep, and I told Wentao to give Watching a message, reach the second layer of chi refining before year's end, and she could go home again. He asked why it had to be by year's end. Why not later, whenever she managed it? I didn't tell him, but I knew exactly how many autumns 2 failing old people had left. And I wanted the dragon to spend every visit she could while there was still someone at the end of the road to wrap a pastry for. Some kindnesses you don't explain. You just set the deadline and hope the child beats it. Around then, I learned exactly how much I'd become worth, and it terrified me. The prodigy I'd accidentally captured, Long Jian, sent for me from his cell, and instead of revenge, he offered me a job. "Come to the Zhuantian sect," he said. He knew about the flower. Some new spy had told him. He knew that whatever it was, only I could grow it, and that made me, quietly, one of the most valuable men alive. He'd shield me, reward me, protect me, absolutely, if I'd only grow his sect a divine flower. I thanked him and committed to nothing, and walked out understanding that I was no longer a nobody who might get killed. I was a prize that every great sect on the continent now wanted to own, which is a much more dangerous thing to be, so I prepared to run. I bled myself half to death learning to paint a 1,000-mile teleport talisman, a single-use card that ignores every barrier and flings you a random 700 miles in a blink. It cost me so much spirit to make one that I nearly blacked out, but a card that could yank me out of any trap in the world, past any wall, was worth a headache. I made it, and I hid it, and I hoped I'd never have to find out where it dropped me. I found out sooner than I wanted, because the world came to collect me. 3 great sects arrived at the gates, Xuantian, Fenglei, and Luoxia. 13 experts I mostly couldn't even read, there to settle the war, and as a small extra condition, to take me. The Luoxia sect wanted me dead for Lin Mei. The Zhuantian wanted my humiliation for Longjian, and the sect, sitting on a pile of war loot it didn't want to fight to keep, was ready to sell one inner disciple to keep the peace. That was me. I was the small print. Wang Cheng walked me up to a peak to listen, because that's the kind of favor he does, a front row seat to the negotiation over my own life, and my master, of all people, refused them, twice. Emotion, severing. Cliff will not hand over the person, Xie Yinfeng said, in that voice like a closing door, and I sat there stunned, because the man owed me nothing, had never once been warm to me, and was spending real capital to keep 3 great sects from dragging me off. It was the closest thing to love I'd gotten since 2 corn buns, and it came from a locked door in winter, and I have never forgotten it. But a master can only refuse so many times. They found the compromise every powerful person finds when a small life is in the way. Not death, just the lawless tower, strip his cultivation, break him down a whole realm, exile him to the outer sect. And the Luoxia man added his own garnish. Before the tower, he wanted to drive a dagger into my throat personally, the way I'd done to Lin Mei, and watch me feel it. My master's jaw tightened. He did not refuse a third time. He couldn't. Below, on my borrowed peak, I made my decision quietly, the way I make all of them. I wasn't going into that tower. I wasn't going to kneel for a Luoxia blade. I had a teleport talisman in my sleeve and a whole dark continent to vanish into. And tonight, before dawn, I was going to become a hunted man on the run, because a hunted man is at least a living one. I never got the chance to run, because that was the night I finally learned what the woman in the red dress actually was. It started as a chill on the back of the neck of every powerful person on that field. Then, from somewhere deep inside the sect, miles away, behind walls, behind everything, a moon rose. Not the moon. A moon. A blade of white light that stole the daylight for its own, that carried the cold of the grave, that crossed an impossible distance in a single breath and passed over the heads of 13 of the strongest cultivators I'd ever been in the presence of. They saw it coming. They screamed about starting a war. They threw up every defense they had, and the light unmade all of it. Armor, treasures, techniques, like the moon had simply decided they didn't exist. It swept across all 13 and moved on, and for a moment nothing happened, and the weakest of them, a golden core, actually laughed in relief. Then 12 heads left 12 shoulders, and only the weakest man was left alive, standing in a reign of the others, kept breathing on purpose so that someone could carry the message home. The message was short: bring some sincerity next time. The captives will spend 5 days in the lawless tower, and the 12 lineages of this sect will not bow to anyone ever, and any leader who disagrees is welcome to step down or be stepped down. I sat on my little peak and understood, all at once, the thing I'd been refusing to understand for 2 years. Everyone treated the acting head of the sect, Ye Xuan, with fear, but nobody had bowed to that blade. They'd been terrified of it, the way you're terrified of weather, of the sea, of a thing that could end you without noticing. There was exactly one person in the entire sect more frightening than the acting leader, the one who never appeared, the sect leader herself, the Tianyan witch, who'd built this whole demonic empire on rivers of blood a century ago and then vanished into seclusion. And I knew her. I poured her tea. I watered her flower. I'd spent a night keeping her alive on my floor when she came through my door poisoned and dying, and she'd put a sword to my throat in the morning and a curse in my stomach, and she'd been coming back ever since to blast me into walls over the quality of my leaves, the most feared being in the sect, my one-night accident, the crack in my armor. She had just taken 12 heads off 12 envoys rather than let 3 great sects carry me away. The flower in my yard wasn't bait the sect had happened to hand me. It was hers. She had planted the most coveted object under heaven in a nobody's backyard, and then she had watched over the nobody, and when the world came to collect him, she had reached out from the dark and erased the world. I didn't say a word of it out loud, you don't. But somewhere far off, in a pavilion by a lake, I later learned, she pressed her fingers to her lips after that strike and coughed blood into her hand, still not healed, 2 years on, from the poison and the ambush that had driven her through my door in the first place. The strongest person I'd ever met, quietly bleeding, spending strength she didn't have to spare, on me. My name came off the active watch, my confinement lifted, my sentence quietly forgotten. I walked home, and in my own courtyard, with the danger finally past, I looked down and found my hands were shaking, actually shaking. I'd been so calm for so long, the poison keeps me calm, keeps my face still through every kind of terror, that I'd forgotten the fear still went somewhere. It had been going into my hands the whole time, and now that it was safe to feel it, it all came out at once. I stood there and let a boy who'd been sold for 2 corn buns tremble in private for a minute. He'd earned it. Then the fragrance came, and she was sitting at my table, not even looking at the flower. "Tend my flower," she said, "and get ready. You're coming with me, to a town." I bowed. I said it would be an honor. It was a lie. and she knew it was a lie, and neither of us cared, because we'd finally arrived at the truth we'd been circling for 2 years. She owned me now, completely, in the plain way a storm owns a field. And she was about to take me out of the only walls I'd ever known, into the wide world, for reasons entirely her own. I had no idea, packing my bags to follow a witch into the open, that she was about to walk me straight back to the beginning of my whole life. I left the sect the dramatic way, by triggering my precious teleport talisman in my own courtyard, the escape card I'd nearly killed myself to make. It flung me a few hundred miles and dumped me in a forest so dizzy I couldn't stand. She was already there, sitting on a branch, dressed for travel, waiting. 500 miles, she said mildly, as if grading my throw. I understood something then that settled every question I'd ever had about running. I could carry 1,000 of those talismans, spend a fortune, bleed myself white making them, and it would not matter in the slightest. There was no wall she couldn't reach through, no distance she couldn't fold. She reached out, wrapped us both in red light, and the world blinked. And when it came back, I was standing on a road outside a walled town, with people streaming through the gates, and 4 painted characters over the arch that stopped my heart. Luo City. A journey of more than a day for a man on a flying sword, crossed in the space of a breath. And a place I knew, a place I'd buried so deep I'd nearly forgotten I owned it. Because before the demonic sect, before the stepmother, before the corn buns, before all of it, I had been a small child in this city. This was the town I'd been born in. This was the home I'd told myself, on all those bad nights, that I'd come back and see someday, if I ever survived long enough and grew strong enough and outran enough of my enemies. I had spent years believing that day would never come, and a demoness had just handed it to me on the way to run some errand of her own, without knowing, without caring, casually, the way she did everything. She had business in Luo City, some hunt of her own, a secret message tablet, a rendezvous she needed me to help her chase. I'd get to all of that, but first she looked at the sun, decided it was too bright, and told me to go buy her an umbrella. And just like that, for the first time in 17 years, I was walking the streets of my hometown alone, with money in my pocket and nowhere I had to be, past a pastry shop I'd once pressed my nose against as a starving boy, toward the one door in the world I'd never expected to stand in front of again. I bought her a red umbrella first. She always wore red, I'd noticed. Then I stopped noticing anything but the road, because my feet already knew the way, and they were taking me home. The alley was the same. The door was older. My hand went up to knock and stopped in the air because I suddenly didn't know how to face whatever was on the other side. Then I knocked anyway. An old woman opened it, a stranger. She looked at me and laughed when I asked, stupidly, who she was. "Young man, you knock on my door and ask me who I am." And when I asked for the Lee family, she thought a moment and said, "It used to be theirs." Used to be. Her husband was chopping wood in the back, an old man with white hair and a straight back and the leftover dignity of someone who'd been someone once. He'd bought the house 16 years ago. A year, in other words, after they'd sold me, they'd taken the money and moved on to some other town, no forwarding word, gone. Whether they'd left afraid that the boy they sold to a demonic sect might survive and come back for revenge, I'll never know. I wouldn't have. Even at my worst, I wouldn't have. I took the axe out of the old man's hands and told him to sit while he tried to remember. And I chopped his firewood, right there, in that exact corner, where I'd chopped it at 4 and 5 years old with arms too small to lift the blade, where I'd slept beside the woodpile, where a stepmother's voice used to snap, "Eat, eat, all you know how to do is eat, now get to work." My hands knew the weight of it before my mind did. Set the blade, feel the grain, one heavy strike, split. The old man watched a rich man's son, who'd clearly never labored a day cut wood like he'd been born to it, and marveled, and I let him. "Do you hate them?" he asked, finally, gently, when I told him whose son I was and what they'd done. I thought about it honestly, because he'd asked honestly. "Not really," I said, "just a little resentment." "That's rare," he said. "Anyone else would hate them to their bones." Maybe, but I'd spent so many years just trying to stay alive that somewhere along the way I'd set the hatred down, the way you set down anything too heavy to carry up a mountain. I finished the wood. I stood. And I walked out through the courtyard I remembered, past the stone I used to sit on dreaming of a future, and out the front gate. I heard it close behind me, and I turned, the way I turned once before, 17 years ago, a child being led away, looking back at a shut door I didn't yet understand I'd never open again. Only this time there was no one inside to feel anything about. This time the door closed on an old couple who'd never known me, on a house that had nothing left of me in it, on a home that had already been gone for 16 years and simply hadn't told me yet. I bowed, deeply, all the way down. It was goodbye. Not to them, they were long past reach. To the boy who'd stood here and told himself that someday, when he was strong enough, he'd come home. He'd made it. He was a golden core now, feared by prodigies, hunted by great sects, watering a flower for the most terrifying woman alive. He'd grown strong enough to come home. And he'd arrived to find that home doesn't wait. It's not a place you reach, it's a place you leave, and it keeps leaving, right up until there's nothing there to reach. Had I let it go? No. But I'd finished it. Set it down. And something in me that had been clenched tight since I was 5 years old finally, quietly, opened its hand. And my cultivation moved. Not from bubbles, not from a pill, not from a mine. From the letting go. Power surged up through me, clean and vast, my state of mind cracking open into something wider, and in half an hour, on a dusty street, I gained more than half a year of grim tempering in a garden had ever given me. I understood it, standing there, the thing all my hiding and hoarding had never taught me. You can only put down what you've truly picked up. You can only understand what you've truly lost. I'd had to come all the way home and find it gone to take the next real step toward the primordial spirit. So I bought her a tea set, a pale red one, quiet and fine, because a demoness deserves better than a roadside cup, and because I finally had the coin. And I bought a little box of the pastries I'd pressed my nose against as a starving child, and I ate one on the street, 22 years old, fulfilling a 5-year-old's wish at last, and it was good, and it was enough. That's where I'll leave it, friend. A boy who was sold for 2 steamed corn buns, standing in the town that sold him, a golden core cultivator with a natal blade and a talking rabbit and a flower that half the world would kill for, eating a pastry he could finally afford in front of a home that no longer exists. Because the story doesn't stop there. It can't. There's a witch waiting under a red umbrella with a hunt of her own and a hold on me I'll never break. There's a flower in my yard still climbing toward the day it blooms, and the day it blooms is the day the whole world comes for it, and for me. There's a dragon quietly eating my only friend from the inside. There's a faceless man named Mo Ran who was sitting across a table from me, taking notes. And there's a little dragon of a girl racing the end of the year to see 2 old people one more time before the road runs out. And I know exactly how that particular race ends, and I'd give a great deal to be wrong, but all of that is ahead. Right now, for one afternoon, in the one place that ever had the right to break my heart, I'm just a man who came home, and found it gone, and set it down, and grew. Was it worth it? The fine, the flower, the killings, the poison, the witch who owns me. I honestly don't know yet. But today, I've got a pastry I waited 17 years to eat, a red umbrella to carry back to the most dangerous woman alive, and for the first time since I was 5 years old, nowhere in the whole wide world that I'm afraid to be. Today, that's enough. Tomorrow the flower blooms and everyone comes.